following program is recommended by the National Education Association.
Everything in Iowa begins with the land and goes back to it. The land is the most powerful force in the state. A guidebook published in 1846 said, "This vast and magnificent region is not only the garden of America, but of the world." Iowa's black earth is the most fertile soil on the planet.
That's as good as there is, isn't that right, Tom?
Yeah, that's the topsoil right there. That's the best stuff.
Yep. Nile Valley is good, but then this here is, we don't have to depend on irrigation or anything like that. This ground here, we could get a crop from now, if it didn't rain to harvest time, we could still get a crop. And a good crop.
It's a place of farms and small towns which grew up to serve those farms.
Small town is, you know about everyone. It's kind of nice.
It's a slow town, you know. I like it that way. It's not fast. I've been to the cities and I've been around the country, and it's nice and slow out here, and nobody bothering you.
Iowa. Someone once wrote, Iowa is more a demonstration farm than a place. If there is such a thing as simple home truth, if the idealized American past lives anywhere, if there is an innocent American place, it's in the Iowa we'll be visiting here on Portrait of America. In Iowa, people talk about other places as out west or out east. Iowa is the state in the middle, 25th of the 50 states in land area, 25th in population. It's in the middle of the Middle West, bordered on the east by the Mississippi, on the west by the Missouri River. In the heart of the nation's breadbasket, Iowa is the ultimate farm state. South of Des Moines, it's hilly. You'll find dairy farming and good pastures. In the north and the west, you'll find the best cropland, flat. The topsoil doesn't wash down into gullies. People in places like Palo Alto County know they are fortunate. The last spring snowfall is over, planting time's a few weeks off. You can't find better farmland than this anywhere in the world. The untutored eye of an outsider might see loneliness and desolation here. The close neighbors a half-mile away. But this is a community where people are connected by shared history, by shared concerns. Neighborliness is not a duty, it's a way of life. Iowa is the way America is supposed to be, and once was. The McVeigh farm, 5.5 miles east and 2 south of the town of Mallard. It's 7:30 and time to do the morning chores. The McVeigh twins, Matt and Mark, go along for the ride. However, the farmer here is not their father. There's been a tragedy. Their father, Denny McVeigh, is in a Virginia hospital getting a heart transplant. Not a bypass, a transplant. Neighbor Tom Eberly's been helping out. He looks after more than the chores. Tom knows the twins need attention too.
For one thing, they're away from their family all the time, and like Cheryl's just gotten home for a couple weeks now, and that's the first they've seen them, I'd say in probably 2 months, 2.5 months or something like that. They help me with the chores in the morning, and they like to come out and ride the tractor. Anything to get them out of the house, they like to be out of the house just like mine do, and everybody helps everybody else out when somebody's in need, I guess. I would guess it's a lot more strain than we realize.
There's been other help, like the fundraising pork patty dinner. Cheryl McVeigh remembers how they felt when they heard about it.
To us, it was just awesome when we found out how many people were there and how much money was raised. We just couldn't believe it. And I think, like Danny and I both said, it wasn't so much that we got the money. It was the fact that everybody was thinking about us and helped us out, and we knew how many people really liked us back here. It was just lifted our spirits a lot. It's very comforting to know that things can be carried on without you for a while, and that they're keeping things intact. They're keeping everything together for us. You know, they're really great friends, really good neighbors. It just comes so natural for them to come over and, well, we'll do this for you, and we'll do that, and we'll feed the hogs, put in the crops, take them out, whatever you need. We just went to Tom, because he has done our chores for us before, and said, would you look after the hogs? Danny has to go to the hospital. He said, sure.
I know the neighbors would come into my place just like I've come in here, and the other neighbors have all helped. That's just the way it's always been in this area. Oh, you worry about the weather and all the conditions, the big gambles, I guess you could call them, whatever you want to call that. But as far as me worrying about getting my crops in, if I'm sick or something, I know that there's somebody that'll take over.
Cool, they bring 2 spreader trucks though.
Another neighbor, Jerry Kerschel's, come over from across the road to confer with Tom about how they'll put in Denny's crops.
More stainless dual, so you don't have to be worked in right behind it.
What about 4 is about all you can use, because you only got 2
outlets
pump
on the
holes,
pit.
so you can have 2 dumping and 2 loading, that's about it. Well, it looks like Monday now. Depends on the weather, and it sounds good, I guess, and you say sure.
It's been a very wet spring. Everyone's edgy and restless, waiting for good drying weather. The soil has to be dry, but not too dry.
I don't know, it looks kind of wet, but yet it looks kind of dry.
Twice a day, Tom checks his fields. This time, his neighbor, Phil Kakmaransky's come along.
If it rains tonight, that'll put us back again. It's not late yet, though. It's just on time. It's time to be planting, but it's not late. What do you think, Philip?
Well, it could be a lot wetter ground than this, Tom.
The guy goes ahead and works it tonight. If it rains again tonight, then you've worked it for nothing. You know, part of this has already been worked twice.
You get it in by the 15th of May, it's won't hurt nothing.
More importantly, up to our north and west, you'll see more thunderstorms out there. The activity will encompass most of Iowa, and there could be some severe activity in Iowa and most of Missouri and Illinois. So watch out for that sometime between 4 and 10 p.m. tomorrow evening. Some storms coming in tomorrow night. They could be pretty bad.
But Jerry said we only had an inch. Inch 20 here.
At McVeigh's, Cheryl and her mother are waiting out the weather, too.
I'm not even thinking about a garden this year. You do what you have to do. I've always been a fairly calm, take things as it come person.
Won't be anything left.
I find a lot of comfort in my religion, my faith. Take one. You want some? Just pray, take it one day at a time, and just be able to cope with it. And so far, I've really been able to. I've had help from above. I've had help, a lot of help from friends. It's just like they say, one day at a time.
Finally, it's a perfect day for planting. As usual, more offered to help than were needed to do the job. Denny McVeigh's crops are going in. They're planting 110 acres of corn and as many as soybeans. The spreader truck has applied nitrogen fertilizer to the soil. The farm supply store in Mallard isn't charging for the service. People have volunteered their equipment as well as their labor. By noon, the job's mostly done and the men come in from the fields for dinner. One thing about an event like this, it brings people together. Perhaps because farmers work on their own, they have a reputation for being loners. But it's rare to meet an unsociable Iowa farmer. The life seems to produce individualists, but not silent ones. Talking is a major form of recreation here. So is eating. In the Mallard Centennial Cookbook, you can find how many pecks of potatoes it takes to serve a crowd of 50, 18 separate and distinct pickle recipes, 63 pages of bread, roll, donut, and pretzel recipes, and 7 different ways to make caramel corn. People work hard, and they live well. They share the good and the bad. Somehow life seems to make sense.
Glad we got that in. I like my hair. I just like my hair.
Farmers and sons of farmers have been planting this prairie every spring for 100 years. There's a sense of continuity here, a sense that people grow up knowing what life will be for them. There is a comfort in that.
There you go. What all be?
Romaine Rupert raises hogs, corn, beans, and beef on this farm where he was born and raised, a few miles west of McVeigh's. Romaine and his 3 sons are sorting hogs. Gene is 20, the middle son. Darrell is in his last year of high school, and Larry's 23.
My dad had a farm for me when I started up to help me get started, and now I'm just trying to get my boys started farming. That's the way it is out here, the way the people are, that it just goes from one generation down to the next. And
The Ruperts love farming, and they love working with one another. It's a close family. Each is recognized for his special talents.
one day I seen the pigs run out of the hog house. I couldn't figure out why they was all coming out so fast. And here Gene was 3 years old. He was in there with a little short stick, and he was driving them all out. And I went and hid behind so he wouldn't see me. And I watched him for a little bit. He'd drive them all out, got them all out the door, and then he'd go out and he'd drive them all back in. And he did that 2, 3 times. Finally, I stopped him. But he's always been an expert hog driver ever since, too.
Doc Nessheim, the vet from Mallard, is making a stop at Rupert's today. The cold, wet spring has been hard on the livestock. Doc's treating some of Romaine's steers for pneumonia. Nessheim is a giant of a man, 6 feet, nearly 300 pounds. Along with the medicine, Doc always brings some laughs.
Say, we save this and you can spend this one on your wedding trip.
The big news is that Eugene Rupert's getting married to Sue Henderson Labor Day weekend, after the beans are cultivated and just before the corn harvest. He's got a wedding trip planned to the same place his parents went 30 years ago.
I think we might go to the Black Hills, South Dakota, for a while. I just thought it'd be a scenic place to go and see. Mount Rushmore and all over, so.
But what does his fiancée think?
She don't know about it yet. I'm not gonna tell her. I figure we'll just take off, and I know where I'm going, but she don't.
Say, I got a hold of Orlo. We're gonna stop in there now and treat a pneumonia. Would you get a hold of Gary Travis? He wanted me to kind of stop and look at his calves out in the pasture. See if he'd be around there in about a half hour. Dan is one of my prize clients because he's kind of grown up with me and I've grown up with him. We started out with no money and we worked without borrowing too much, and right now he's one of my more successful hog people, and I feel that probably I've kind of added to the operation.
Part of the service Doc offers his clients is free advice that can be worth a good deal. Nessheim grew up on a farm 50 miles from here, went to veterinary school at Iowa State down in Ames, one of the best in the country. To the farmers, it's obvious Nessheim knows what he's talking about. To Nessheim, it's very satisfying to be able to help improve this farmer's litter survival rates and that one's breeding stock.
Are you ready?
Getting in with these 400-pound sows, Nessheim's like a matador entering the ring. There's a choreography here. Nessheim vaccinates. Dan Vonamy is right behind him, marking each animal with chalk. Blue for one kind of shot, red for another. The animals, Nessheim laughs, don't seem to know he's trying to help them. What we're seeing tells you something about why vets suffer a lot of leg and knee injuries.
You notice you travel around, the animals act a lot like their own. These happen to be wild.
Dan's a bit of a maverick among hog farmers, raising his animals in the open. Lots of farmers will tell you that climate-controlled confinement units are labor savers, that the hogs gain weight faster on less feed. Dan likes the results he gets this way.
When you never had anything when you started, well, you start with what you have and go from there. I'm not a confinement lover. I feel the best hogs are raised right out here in the dirt the way they were 50 years ago, and I know people disagree with me, but I still maintain that that's the best way to raise hogs, because I don't believe in that a sow or a hog, pig of any sort should live in something that costs more money than what I live in. That's my firm belief, I guess. There's no hog going to live in a $100,000 building when I'm living in a $1,000 house. There's no way.
If you're not from Iowa, there are some things you may not know about the state. They call hogs mortgage lifters. In the long run, you can make money with hogs. The corn crop is not for corn on the cob. Like soybeans, it's feed for livestock. And there's some things that even people from Iowa don't know about the state. To find out, you got to get out and take a ride.
She be coming around the mountain when she comes.
RAGBRAI, the Des Moines Register's annual great bike ride across Iowa. RAGBRAI, as every Iowan will remind you, is a ride, not a race, along the back roads of the state. It's an annual event, party, celebration, and reminder that Iowa is not flat. In 1973, a couple of columnists for the Des Moines Register decided to take a week and bicycle across the state. Anyone who wanted to could join in. They were prepared for a dozen, got several hundred. Now it's 6,000 or more.
First time I've ridden a bike.
We'll all go to meet her when she comes. We will all go to meet her when she comes. We'll all go to greet her.
Today, the route goes through the 100-year-old Danish town of Kimballton. In the basement of Town Hall, volunteers are making apple skeever for their food stand.
We had Centennial, and we sold these for 2 solid days, baked and sold for 2 solid days. Kimballton is Danish. Strictly Danish. Some years ago, we were 96.35% Danish.
Brackley, Elkhorn, and Kimballton is together. We call it the Danish community. Yeah, I'm Danish. He's Norwegian. Well, I was born here, but he came from Norway.
I couldn't get any Norwegians. I had to be satisfied with a Dane.
Look how cute you are.
Let's put a photo on that for you, please.
Thank you. It's a case of demand overwhelming supply. At 3 apple skeever for 50 cents, Kimballton has a winner worth waiting for.
My grandmother used to make them for me. I haven't had any since I was about 7.
Ragbri is a time when city-dwelling Iowans are reminded that nothing here, including Des Moines, is far from the prairie. Even John Deere, Iowa's biggest employer, is built on the success of the man who invented the plow that broke the prairie. Iowa was unbroken prairie in the early 1800s, grasses taller than a man's head, topsoil over 3 feet deep under the sod. It was hard to believe. Right outside Des Moines, on this living history farm of the 1840s, they live and work every day as the sodbusters did. Home is a one-room log cabin at first. Clothing is homespun. A corn cob makes a good scouring pad. Running water is generations in the future. By 1900, many things had changed. The railroad was a fact of life. You could ship goods out from the east, ship back Iowa pork and Iowa grain. When the railroad came right after the Civil War, thousands of settlers eager for land followed. There were Irish Catholic and German, Scandinavian and Dutch farms. A town every 6 miles. Good public schools. But some things hadn't changed since the 1840s. The average farm was still 160 acres, a quarter section. Running water was for city folks. It took horses to pull the plow.
As Dad always said, horses have one speed, not slow. And they get tired, you gotta rest them on the ends, and you just can't make the time that you can with the modern equipment like they have.
And corn yields were about the same.
Talking probably 40 bushels to the acre. You had a good year. Nowadays, you're probably getting well over 100 bushel, maybe 150, 160, some of the better corn. They introduced the hybrid seed corn in the 30s.
An Iowan named Henry Wallace, later vice president under Franklin Roosevelt, introduced the new high-yield corn. It changed farming around the world. But when the Depression hit, the Iowa farmers suffered too. One writer said, the Depression, with its farm strikes, has emphasized for us all the fact that the farmer is basic in the economics of the country, an individual capable of thinking and feeling, and not an oaf. That writer was a city boy from Cedar Rapids. Grant Wood, the greatest of America's regionalist painters. The Iowa landscape and farm life were his richest subjects. He glorified them. He imbued them with qualities of myth. Grant Wood also had an interest in house design. In 1932, he helped build Pleasant Hill, the Cedar Rapids home of his ardent admirers, department store owner Robert Armstrong and his wife Esther.
This is a picture of Grant's mother, and I think it's really a very wonderful picture. I like it even better than Whistler's mother, and I think probably it's more notable. Mrs. Wood lived with Grant and he took care of her, and she took care of him. She loved plants, and I do too. And she gave me slips of all of these plants. This one here on the table is a descendant of the Sansevieria that she gave me. People call it mother-in-law's tongue or snake plant or something like that.
He was a very fine artist, but he had the common touch and he understood people, and he was very considerate of people's thoughts. He was not like the average artist that I have known who seems to feel that his own art is superior to everybody, but Grant would take into consideration what the public's thought was about things.
He said that art should be indigenous. And I said to him, do you think there is an indigenous Iowa architecture? And he said, oh, definitely there is. I'll show it to you.
American Gothic had made Grant Wood famous by now. The Armstrongs were a young married couple when it was unveiled 50 years ago. Now they have their own version of it.
I well remember when we were married, I thought of people having a 25th anniversary. How could people be so old as to have a 25th anniversary? I always enjoy looking at my card here, but she's always digging things out of it.
I always say the happiest day of my life was the day I married Robert Armstrong.
I'll see you later then. Best contract I ever made confidentially. I think that getting married at the drop of the hat is one of the causes of so much unhappiness. I would have to say that one's religious ideas are, if you're compatible there, that helps a great deal. I have a great philosophy on religion. I feel that the Lord is in charge of the universe. I think the whole world, he holds the whole world in his hand. And I think that all of us need to be optimistic because I think that eventually the Lord is working the whole universe according to a plan, and I think eventually that plan is going to work out.
Iowa is so fertile and such a good place. We love to travel, and we've gone a lot of places. And I never come home, but I feel like we're just coming back to the Garden of Eden. Things are so good here that it's just easy to find goodness.
Ed Sidey is the fourth-generation Sidey to edit and publish the Adair County Free Press in Greenfield, Iowa. Ed and his younger brother grew up here. When their father retired, Ed accepted his birthright and took over the Free Press. So brother Hugh Sidey left Greenfield to make his life elsewhere. He's been the White House correspondent for Time magazine for 26 years, but he is never far from Greenfield.
My brother and I are very much alike in many ways. He's smarter than I am, always was, got better grades, and could write better than I could. And some days, about every other day, I think he was smarter also in what he decided to do, and that was to be a country editor. There you are with a community, and you see all those small things that matter. Relationships with people, with the land, with a town, a county, a state, with schools. I mean, it's the human drama at the very basic level. Greenfield is my grassroots. You grow up having to live with other people. You have no choice. So you end up being really quite engaged in all of life, curious about things, subjected to forces that you can't control, like nature. A great tolerance develops in this kind of life, and you carry it with you wherever you go.
At 9:30 every morning except Sunday, you can find Ed Sidey at the Ideal Cafe.
I was listening to public radio yesterday, and Hugh actually just said that he didn't think Reagan was going to change his stance or his mind. Which one can say?
Coffee groups are a staple of small-town life. This is how business gets done and how the great issues are decided.
Look back. I don't think anybody wants to. Leaders do.
What good is that fleet of 8 ships going to do to that little gorilla up in the hills? He could care less what...
That takes about 20 minutes. Now back to work. Wednesday is press day. Ed's wife, Linda, pitches in to help. Ed sees the paper as a semi-public service, the glue that holds the community together, he says. Nearly everyone in the county is a subscriber.
One of the functions, I think, of a small-town newspaper is to give everyone a spot in the news. It's a philosophy that, my brother once talking with Hubert Humphrey when he was a candidate said the problem in the inner city is that people can be born and live and get married and die and never once have their name in the paper in any respect. So we put their name in when they're born in our stork notes, and we run a big, long story when they're married, and we put a story on the front page when they die.
Part of Ed's regular beat is the county courthouse. He's a thorough reporter, but not eager for sensational items.
We make more or less a deliberate effort to downplay crime news, although we do have a policy that it must go in. And that's always an editor's problem, is the person that gets picked up for drunk driving and doesn't want it in the paper, comes to you and says, won't you keep it out for my sake? And if you make one exception, of course, you're doomed. Everybody comes to you.
It was busy.
I still say I have a writ of possession, which is what we need.
We're in the set cleanup.
Is there any,
We're in the set cleanup.
any more done with this possession thing that...
We're in.
The alcohol program?
Yeah.
That's been involved, and it's been operating for about 8 weeks now.
Yeah. How's it doing?
Great success. We've had reduced violations all the way through the county.
Anything said about publication of names?
No, nothing's been said about that. Freedom of the press still reigns on that one.
The Adair County Fair is this week's big news, bigger than the story about the presidential candidate who made a campaign stop at the country club Saturday night, bigger than the predictions of a bad corn crop because there hasn't been any rain since mid-June.
She's all the turkeys. No cookies.
Cookies? What else?
The fair queen will get her picture on the front page.
There was 8 girls, 8 of us girls, and our fathers escorted us, and we went up there and sat down, and we were all not too confident in ourselves, and they announced it. I just sat there, and I turned around, I gave Dad a hug, and he hasn't stopped smiling since Sunday night.
The fair, our news coverage is is mostly picture coverage. And it's important to our readers that we get pictures of all those winners, because if we don't, why, some kid is hurt, because he alone of all the other beef champions was not in the paper. So we make a great effort to catch every one. And we always miss one, but we always try the next year to score 100%. Well, I just need the names of the kids so I can try to track them down here, the ones that was champion.
This is the prestige event, the steer judging. The animals are bred for length, that means more steaks, and height. The bigger they are, the more meat they produce. These boys have spent hours every day with their calves preparing for this moment in the ring.
Okay, champion, middleweight home race steer, Scotty Davis.
The steers aren't used to crowds. It's easy to lose control.
Very meaty, kind of a brown steer, kind of a steer.
This pie has a nice flaky crust. It has not boiled over. It has a nice browning. The filling is not runny. It's holding together. It looks like apple raisin or raisin. I think it's a very good pie. The second one will be the raisin. Again, a good flavor. It's flaky. It's a good consistency, very attractive. Everybody has done a good job here. These are really good pies.
Our first place winner is Linda Jensen from Fontenelle. Is she here? Okay, would you come forward, please? Yes.
Thank you. Did you use lard in yours? Yes. Okay, last time that small plate here.
There's a surprise confession from the winner.
I peach too, and you're right, it was canned.
Okay.
Because the frozen one didn't turn out well.
Now, give me a smile.
Do you really want a recipe? I mean, I will tell you though, it's home rendered lard. So, you know, if you raise pigs, you want to be sure and say this is lard. So that's the secret to a good crust. That's our plug.
My father was fond of saying that the best edited, best written, best printed newspaper in the world was not worth a dime until it got in the hands of the reader. As long as I can remember, even as a kid, working up here on Wednesdays, and at that time it was the old letterpress operation, and we used to print late at night. Sometimes it was almost midnight. And still on a warm summer evening, there'd be a line of people standing outside waiting for their paper that late at night. I think Iowa is a small-town state, and that's part of our charm and part of our strength. My house is built on what used to be a neighbor's chicken lot. This has been my home for most of my life, except for 12 years of Army service and that sort of thing. It's a pleasant community, about the right size, and people get along well, and we have, I suppose, just a lot of good people who believe in hard work and have licked the battles with greed and ambition to the point where they're content with what we have here.
Back up in Palo Alto County around Mallard, it's been a dry growing season, too dry. Recently, there's been a little rain, good for the beans, they say, but too late for the corn. Everyone expects the corn harvest will be down to around 100 bushels an acre. 100 miles west in South Dakota, that would be a big crop. But here, they're accustomed to 150 bushel, 160 bushel corn. Out on the McVeigh farm, Denny's been home from the hospital for 2 months. He's recuperating well from his heart transplant, and the crops his neighbors planted for him last spring are looking amazingly good. When the children get off the school bus every day, they know they'll find their father at home. Denny can't ever farm again, though. Too much danger of a respiratory infection. The land will be rented out to another farmer. However, the family will stay in this house, and Wendy, Matt, and Mark will still grow up as farm children. It has been an ordeal for Cheryl, for them all. But they are together now, and everything Denny sees fills him with gratitude.
After being away from them for that long, you appreciate them that much more when you are here. But I hadn't really realized how much kids can change in that amount of time, and I was just overjoyed to be here. I'm still in that state, I guess, that they aren't just little rascals to me now. They're really something special. Iowa never looked so good to me as it did when we came home. I had what I consider a beautiful corn crop. It looked like I planted it, but the people that did it had enough pride to make it look like I did it. I can't say enough about how, what a good job they've done with everything that they've tried to take care of for me. For the amount of moisture that we've had, I'm really amazed that we've got the kind of crop that we do have. We look forward to spring to plant one, and look forward to fall to harvest it, and it's going to be a whole different change of pace for me to not have the opportunity to do that. It gets you about as close to the earth as you can get. I'm pretty certain that one or the other of them is going to want to farm eventually, and I'd like to give my sons the opportunity to do that. That's part of the reason that we want to stay on the farm.
Summer's ending. It's almost Labor Day. Eugene Rupert and Sue Henderson are getting married Saturday afternoon at the Mallard Catholic Church. There's been a stag party and 3 bridal showers. One was supposed to be a surprise, but someone spilled the beans. Romaine and Levon Rupert are giving Sue and Eugene a washer and dryer as a wedding present. The couple's been engaged nearly a year. Eugene was Sue's first date when she was allowed to go out with boys at 16. Romaine's son is her first and only love.
We've gone out 192 times for Saturday nights.
I'm glad you counted them.
I keep a record. I have a diary of every time we've seen each other and talked and everything. We just decided, let's go get the ring, and he just gave it to me, and I wasn't going to accept it till he asked me, but I figured I better accept it.
That was all. I knew she'd accept.
Yes. I'm glad I'm marrying a farmer.
And I gotta have this on the whole.
I'm sorry to say so, yes.
Anybody want a beer? Almost done. How's that look? Fine.
Good enough. Yeah, that's good.
Burke figured it out.
Okay, can you say fuzzy pickles?
Repeat after me. I, Eugene Rupert, take you, Susan Henderson,
I, Eugene Rupert, take you, Susan Henderson,
to be my wife.
to be my wife.
There are almost 250 people at the reception. The population of the entire town of Mallard is only 407. The party will go on for hours, but the groom's father, who seldom missed chores in 30 years of farming, goes home for a while to feed his livestock.
I was happy for him, and he's happy, and I think we're getting a nice daughter-in-law that we're proud to have in the community. Looks like they're going to be farming. They got quite a bit of ground to farm. And they got a nice place, nice house to live at. One thing, what I like about farming, every day is something different. You don't have to go do the same thing. Like we're planting, then we'll be cultivating, and then walking beans, and combining oats, and then we have a little break in there. Then we're filling silo, and then we're combining beans, and then we're combining corn. Then we plow, and then it's about winter time.
Like we said, in Iowa, everything begins with the land and goes back to it. I'm Hal Holbrook. Join us again for Portrait of America.